Okay, this is the first part of a two-part video on implementing a flipped classroom. As always, we have to begin with some operational definitions. So when we say a flipped class or classroom, what we're talking about is an instructional strategy. In a traditional classroom, instruction, and that is to say new information, is presented to the student in class. The student then goes home, practices what they've learned via homework or whatever activities you have planned. In a flipped environment, the instruction is provided outside of class via some digital format and practice. Strengthening and extension occur in class. A blended learning environment is one that combines these two approaches. So the rationale behind this is that most students, the first time they encounter new information is usually passive and forms only weak neural connections. Students may assimilate new information but cannot accommodate that new information into their schema until they actually do something with it. It's this secondary level of doing that leads to mastery and requires the presence of an expert. Initial learning of information does not lead to mastery, nor does it necessarily require the physical presence of an expert. For example, when we say, read chapter 2 in your textbook and we will discuss it in class on Tuesday. In a flipped classroom, lectures are available online, usually supplemented by a text. Students watch the video, read the text outside of class. Class time is reserved for that secondary level of instruction, during which students are asked to apply the new learning in some way. It's at this time that students will typically generate their own questions. How do I do this? Why can't I just do whatever? When am I ever going to use this? Class time is now available for making connections to prior learning or cross-curricular connections. There are some well-recorded benefits to a flipped approach. Students can learn at their own pace within the limits set by the teacher or the district or curriculum. Students can review lectures. They don't have to rely on their notes or the notes of fellow students that are often rushed or unclear. Mastery learning is best achieved by working in groups in the presence of an expert. The more time we make available for secondary learning activities, the better the chance our students will have at achieving that mastery level. In a flipped environment, grading becomes a collaborative process between the teacher and the student. This can also reduce student anxiety in that they now know that they have the opportunity to improve their score and work towards that mastery level. There are also benefits to parents and families. As we all know, in today's world, parents are more involved in their child's education than ever before. Parents want to know what their child is learning and doing in school. A flipped environment provides them with a window into the classroom and hopefully an appreciation for the expertise and the professionalism of the teacher. Flipping your class can have a downside and should not be seen as a panacea for all the problems in our educational system. The flipped classroom requires access to and use of technology. Not all schools, students, or families have that adequate level of access. Sometimes flipping ends up creating more homework time for students, putting them in front of a blue light screen for even longer periods of time and at even more detrimental times of the day. They may be staying up late at night to watch lecture videos now. There's also a considerable upfront workload when flipping. Teachers have to learn to use the requisite technology, carefully plan and prepare their videos or other online media options. They have to rework lesson plans to take into account the added time available in class now for working with students towards that mastery level. It's a great way to drive your class towards mastery, but unfortunately students are not always being asked to master content, but rather regurgitated on high-stakes tests. Flipping is not a great way to do test prep. Although it can provide a great way for students to review, but be careful here. Often students make the mistake of thinking that if information is available online, it doesn't need to be made available in their memory banks. Parents may also be resistant to the flipped approach. One major consideration, again, is the amount of screen time. If students are spending more time sitting in front of a computer at home working on online activities or viewing lessons, then they may not be spending time with the family. These obstacles can be overcome. I advocate for a more blended approach. Be cognizant of how much viewing time you are asking of your students. So here are three options for a blended learning environment. 1. Use online videos to introduce big ideas or questions. Get the kids thinking about problems first. Pair your short intro lectures with online assessments that ask students to formulate opinions, develop questions, propose hypotheses. You can still post full-length videos or lectures. They can be highly detailed with a lot of content, but use them only for review or make them accessible for students who missed class. Another option is to use third-party vendors like Khan Academy or your online textbook. In this approach, you can cover big ideas and questions in class as a primer, introduce the detailed content and terminology online outside of class, and then apply when you're back in the classroom after students have had a little bit of time to process. In this approach, I would recommend frequent, short online activities and lectures. This may be a good approach for a math class or a science class. Finally, you can blur the lines between in and out of class time even further by moving towards a competency-based approach. In this approach, you're allowing students to use some class time to view or complete online content, and then reserving some class time to work with students individually or in small groups. As students reach benchmarks or complete assessments, you can provide expert guidance and activities in class. This approach gives the teacher a better idea of which students could benefit from remediation or extension. There is one caution here though. This approach works best when the teacher already has established clear classroom policies and procedures, and is not overburdened with a large roster. If you have classes of over 25 students 6 times a day, then this approach can become very burdensome. So we've discussed the terminology, the definitions, and some of the rationale for a flipped approach, and some options that you might want to consider. In the next video, we'll talk about the technology that you have available for you at Pine Richland and how to go about recording, editing, and posting your videos online.